A quartet of loved ones embarked on a road trip through Death Valley, a region notorious as one of America's most perilous landscapes. For family members set out to explore Death Valley, a place infamous for its treacherous and unforgiving terrain. The temperature soared beyond 115 degrees Fahrenheit. Scorching heat climbed past 115 degrees Fahrenheit, turning the air into a relentless furnace. The landscape stretched endlessly, remote, and life-threatening. The terrain sprawled vast, desolate, and deadly, with danger lurking in every direction. They vanished without a trace. No one ever saw them again after they ventured into the wilderness. No search efforts succeeded, no hints emerged, just a sealed minivan and an eerie stillness. Rescue missions failed, no clues surfaced, only a locked minivan sat in haunting silence. For 13 years, not a shred of proof appeared until two unaware hikers strayed from the path and uncovered a game-changing find. Over a dozen years passed with no evidence until a pair of unsuspecting trekkers wandered off-trail and stumbled upon a discovery that shifted everything. This isn't your average missing persons story. This isn't just another case of people disappearing without a trace. This is the tale of the Death Valley Travelers, a family whose ideal getaway turned into a horrifying ordeal, puzzling officials for over a decade and revealing the devastating impact of a single wrong choice. This is the story of the Death Valley Wanderers, a close-knit group whose dream vacation became a nightmare, leaving authorities stumped for years and showing how one misstep can lead to catastrophe. On July 27, 1996, a green Plymouth minivan was due back at a Los Angeles rental agency. On July 27, 1996, a rental company in Los Angeles expected the return of a green Plymouth minivan, but it never arrived. Instead, it lay half-buried in sand in one of Death Valley's most isolated stretches. Instead, it sat stranded, engulfed by sand, in a remote corner of Death Valley's vast expanse. Its occupants were nowhere to be seen. The people inside had disappeared, as if swallowed by the desert itself. The fate of James Carter, his partner Emily Thompson, and their two young children remains one of America's most haunting vanishings. What happened to Michael Johnson, his girlfriend Sarah Davis, and their two small kids still ranks among the most chilling disappearances in U.S. history. Let's rewind to July 8, 1996, at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, where four thrilled visitors from Dresden, Germany, disembarked, ready for what they thought would be an epic adventure. Take a step back to July 8, 1996, when four eager travelers from Dresden, Germany, landed at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, buzzing with anticipation for what they believed would be a life-changing journey. Michael Johnson, a 34-year-old architect, harbored ambitions too grand for his small hometown. At 34, David Wilson, an architect, dreamed of a life bigger than his quiet hometown could offer. His 11-year-old son, Ethan Parker, was by his side. Traveling alongside him was his 11-year-old son, Jacob Harris. Sarah Davis, known as Sadie to her friends, was Michael's 27-year-old girlfriend. Also with them was Emily Clark, or Emma to her close friends, David's 27-year-old partner. Trailing behind was little Noah Davis, Sadie's 4-year-old son. Bringing up the rear was young Liam Thompson, Emma's 4-year-old son. They'd scrimped and saved for this journey, meticulously planning every detail, filled with the thrill of discovering a new continent. They'd pinched pennies for this trip, carefully mapping out every step, brimming with excitement to explore an unfamiliar land. From Seattle, they hopped a flight straight to Los Angeles, where they picked up their rental, a green 1996 Plymouth Voyager minivan. After landing in Seattle, they caught a quick flight to Los Angeles, where they collected their rental vehicle, a green 1996 Plymouth Voyager minivan. The family kicked off their trip in the San Clemente area of Southern California, basking in the coastal sun and adjusting to the sprawling new country. They spent their first few days in Southern California's San Clemente region, soaking up the ocean breeze and getting a feel for this expansive new place. During the journey, Michael contacted his German bank. requesting a $1,500 wire transfer to California, and faxed his ex-wife for extra funds, which never came, before heading into the park. While traveling, David reached out to his bank in Germany to have $1,500 sent to California and sent a fax to his ex-wife asking for more money, which was never delivered, before entering the park. On July 22, 1996, as the family drove toward the park, the heat spiked to a scorching 124 degrees Fahrenheit. As the family headed toward the park on July 22, 1996, temperatures rocketed to a blistering 124 degrees Fahrenheit, baking the surroundings. The pavement shimmered with heat waves, and the air felt like it was burning. The asphalt rippled with heat mirages, and the air itself seemed to sear with every breath. They thought they'd prepared well enough, or so they believed. They figured they'd done their homework, or at least they were confident they had. At the Furnace Creek Visitor Center, they bought 2 copies of the Death Valley National Monument Museum Guide. At the Furnace Creek Visitor Center, they picked up 2 copies of the Death Valley National Monument Museum booklet. These were, importantly, German-language versions that shaped their understanding of this unfamiliar terrain. Crucially, these guides were in German, guiding their perception of this strange and daunting landscape. Instead of splurging on pricey hotels, they opted to camp in their minivan that night in Hanapa Canyon near Telescope Peak. Rather than shelling out for expensive lodging, they chose to sleep in their minivan that evening in Hanapa Canyon, close to Telescope Peak. On the morning of July 23rd, the family ventured out to explore. The next day, July 23rd, the family set off to discover the area's sights. They stopped at various tourist spots, snapping photos with a Praktica 35mm camera. They visited several attractions, capturing memories with a Praktica 35mm camera. Investigators later checked the visitor log at the Warm Spring mine site along the route between the main valley and another valley, finding an entry from the group on July 23rd, written in German. "We are going over the pass," signed by Emma, David, Jacob, and Liam. Authorities later reviewed the guestbook at the Warm Spring mine site, located between the main valley and another valley, discovering a note from the family dated July 23rd, written in German, stating, "We're heading over the pass," and signed by Sadie, Michael, Ethan, and Noah. The pass they mentioned was likely Mengel Pass, which seemed manageable on their German maps but was actually a dangerous trail meant only for four-wheel drive vehicles. The pass they referred to was probably Mengel Pass, which looked straightforward on their German-language maps but was, in truth, a treacherous path suitable only for rugged four-wheel drive rigs. Their Plymouth minivan, designed for city streets and highways, stood no chance on such rough ground. Their Plymouth minivan, built for suburban roads and smooth highways, was utterly unprepared for that brutal terrain. During their travels, they also stopped by a geologist's cabin in Butte Valley, taking an American flag as a keepsake. At some point in their journey, they visited a geologist's cabin in Butte Valley, grabbing an American flag as a memento. This wasn't theft, but rather the naive act of tourists gathering tokens, unaware of the flag's importance. It wasn't malicious. It was just the impulsive move of visitors collecting souvenirs, not grasping the significance of what they took. As the day wore on and the heat grew fiercer, the family made choices that felt reasonable but would turn deadly. As the sun climbed higher and the heat intensified, the family made decisions that seemed sensible at the time but would prove fatal. Their guidebook pointed to what looked like a quicker route back to the main valley, a path called Enville Canyon. Their booklet highlighted what appeared to be a shorter way back to the main valley, a trail known as Enville Canyon. They had no idea this wasn't a proper road but an old, neglected mining track and used for decades. Unbeknownst to them, this wasn't a real road at all, but a rough, abandoned mining path left untouched for years. They couldn't have foreseen that this one wrong turn would erase them so completely, making them one of America's most perplexing missing persons cases. They never could have imagined that a single bad choice would make them vanish so thoroughly, turning their story into one of the nation's most baffling disappearances. By the close of July 23, 1996, the family was stranded in one of the planet's most desolate and hostile places. By the end of July 23, 1996, the family found themselves trapped in one of Earth's most remote and unforgiving environments. With no means to call for help and little hope of being found, their vacation had become a desperate struggle to survive. Unable to contact anyone and with slim chances of rescue, their dream trip had spiraled into a grim battle for survival. They booked a flight back to Germany from Los Angeles for July 27, 1996, but there was no sign they ever made it to the plane or left the U.S. They had reserved a flight from Los Angeles to Germany on July 27, 1996, but no evidence showed they boarded or departed the country. Michael's ex-wife, Laura Parker, grew worried when her ex-husband and son didn't return from their trip, prompting her to start asking questions. David's ex-wife, Rachel Evans, became alarmed when her former spouse and son failed to come back from their vacation, leading her to seek answers. German officials reached out to their American counterparts, but with no crime scene, no witnesses, and unclear jurisdiction, the case slipped into limbo. Authorities in Germany contacted their U.S. counterparts, but without a crime scene, witnesses, or clear authority, the investigation stalled in a bureaucratic mess. The family had entered the country legally as foreign nationals. And then, nothing. As foreign visitors, they'd arrived in the U.S. legally. Then they simply vanished. They could have gone anywhere, done anything, or even orchestrated their own disappearance for reasons no one could fathom. They might have wandered off anywhere, done something unexpected, or even planned their own vanishing for motives no one could guess. On October 21, 1996, nearly 3 months after the family vanished, Death Valley National Park Ranger Tom Bennett was conducting routine helicopter surveillance, looking for illegal drug operations hidden in the desert's secluded corners. On October 21, 1996, almost 3 months after the family disappeared, Death Valley Park Ranger John Matthews was flying routine aerial patrols, searching for covert drug labs tucked away in the desert's isolated pockets. In Anvil Canyon, about 2.4 miles downstream from Willow Spring, he spotted a vehicle that didn't belong. In Anvil Canyon, roughly 2.4 miles past Willow Spring, he noticed a vehicle that seemed out of place. It wasn't the sturdy four-wheel drive rig you'd expect on an old mining trail. It wasn't the tough, off-road vehicle you'd anticipate finding on an abandoned mining track. Bennett grew suspicious immediately. Matthews' instincts kicked in, sensing something was wrong. Anvil Canyon had been a protected wilderness area since the 1994 Desert Protection Act, banning public vehicles. Since the Desert Protection Act of 1994, Anvil Canyon was a designated wilderness, off-limits to public vehicles. The mining roads had been shut down for decades, left unused since the 1907 financial panic halted most operations in the region. Those old mining paths had been closed off for years, abandoned after the 1907 economic crash ended most local mining. When the chopper touched down, Bennett approached the vehicle with caution. As the helicopter landed, Matthews carefully neared the vehicle, senses on high alert. The 1996 Plymouth Voyager, bearing California plates, was locked up tight. The 1996 Plymouth Voyager, with California tags, was securely locked. 3 of its tires were completely flat, and the surrounding sand showed signs of a frantic attempt to drive it free. 3 tires were deflated, and the sand around it bore marks of a desperate effort to get the vehicle moving. The axles were sunk deep in the sand, clear proof it had been stuck there for a while. Its axles were buried in the sand, a sure sign the van had been marooned for some time. But where were the people inside? But where had the passengers gone? Then it called for backup and started the process to identify the van's renters. Matthews radioed for support, beginning the steps to trace who had rented the vehicle. When California Highway Patrol checked the plates, they found the van was reported stolen by the Los Angeles police on September 10, 1996. When the California Highway Patrol ran the plates, they discovered the vehicle had been listed as stolen by Los Angeles police on September 10, 1996. It belonged to Dollar Car Rentals and had been leased to 4 German tourists on July 8. Owned by Dollar Car Rentals, it had been rented out to 4 German visitors on July 8. But this find only sparked more questions than it answered. Yet this discovery raised more mysteries than it solved. If the family had been stuck there since late July, surviving Death Valley's summer heat without proper shelter or water would have been nearly impossible beyond a few hours. If the family had been stranded since late July, enduring the brutal summer heat of Death Valley without adequate water or cover would have been a matter of hours, not days. On October 22, Death Valley National Park investigator Ryan Coleman was airlifted to the site to start a thorough inspection. On October 22, park investigator Chris Turner was flown to the location to conduct a detailed examination. Aside from Bennett's tracks from the day before, no other footprints were visible near the vehicle. Other than Matthews' footprints from the previous day, no other tracks could be seen around the van. Inside, Coleman found items that told the story of a family trip gone horribly wrong. Turner uncovered contents that painted a picture of a family vacation that had taken a tragic turn. The van held all the typical tourist gear: suitcases, clothes, kids' toys, camera gear, and several rolls of film. Inside were the usual belongings of travelers: luggage, clothing, children's toys, photography equipment, and multiple film rolls. There were unopened bottles of beer and bourbon, sleeping bags, and camping supplies. The van contained full bottles of bourbon and beer, along with sleeping bags and camping gear. Most revealing was one of the German-language guidebooks bought at the Furnace Creek Visitor Center. Most telling was a German-language guidebook purchased at the Furnace Creek Visitor Center. But there was also proof of how far off track the family had gone. Yet there was also evidence of just how badly the family had lost their way. The American flag taken from the Butte Valley geologist cabin showed they'd reached that far-flung spot. The American flag swiped from the geologist's cabin in Butte Valley confirmed they'd ventured to that remote location. Food wrappers and signs of human waste nearby suggested they'd stayed at least one night there. Scattered food wrappers and traces of human waste near the van indicated they'd spent at least one night at the site. The van's location sat at about 3,000 feet elevation, meaning on July 23, when investigators think the family got stuck, the high would have been around 107 degrees Fahrenheit, with lows near 79 degrees. At roughly 3,000 feet in altitude, the van's spot would have seen highs of about 107 degrees Fahrenheit on July 23, the day authorities believed the family became stranded, with nighttime lows around 79 degrees Fahrenheit. Those conditions might be survivable with enough water and shade, but deadly without them. With ample water and shelter, those temperatures might be manageable, but without them, they'd be lethal. The van was carefully extracted from Anvil Canyon on October 23, sparking the biggest search and rescue effort in Death Valley's history. On October 23, the van was painstakingly removed from Anvil Canyon, triggering the largest search and rescue operation Death Valley had ever seen. On October 23, 1996, as dawn broke over Death Valley, the park's most massive search and rescue mission was about to kick off. As the sun rose over Death Valley on October 23, 1996, the park prepared to launch its most extensive search and rescue effort ever. The discovery of the abandoned Plymouth Voyager turned a routine missing persons case into a desperate race against time. Finding the deserted Plymouth Voyager transformed a standard missing persons inquiry into an urgent, time-sensitive mission. Everyone involved knew that after 3 months in the desert, this was now about recovery, not rescue. All those involved understood that after 3 months in the harsh desert, the operation had shifted from rescue to recovery. The China Lake Mountain Rescue Group arrived first, followed by trackers from the Indian Wells Valley Search and Rescue Group. The China Lake Mountain Rescue Team was the first on the scene, joined soon by trackers from the Indian Wells Valley Search and Rescue Crew. 8 mounted units from the Kern County Sheriff's Mounted Search and Rescue brought horses able to navigate terrain vehicles couldn't. 8 horse-mounted units from the Kern County Sheriff's Search and Rescue Team arrived, their steeds capable of crossing rugged ground no vehicle could handle. Search teams fanned out from Anvil Canyon like spokes on a wheel, each unit covering a different slice of the harsh landscape. The search crews spread out from Anvil Canyon in all directions like rays from a hub, each team tackling a separate section of the unforgiving terrain. On day 1, searchers found something chilling. About 1.7 miles east of the van, a China Lake team member spotted a Bud Ice beer bottle half buried in sand by a scruffy bush. On the first day, the searchers uncovered something eerie. Roughly 1.7 miles east of the van's location, a member of the China Lake team noticed a Bud Ice beer bottle partially buried in the sand beside a scraggly shrub. Next to it, someone had scraped out a dirt ledge, leaving what investigators called a large seat print, proof someone had lingered there for a while. Nearby, a patch of dirt had been cleared into a ledge marked by what authorities described as a large seat print, evidence that someone had sat there for an extended time. The bottle matched those in the van, hinting that at least one family member had trekked east from the stranded vehicle. The bottle was identical to those found inside the van, suggesting at least one of the family had walked east from their stuck minivan. But this lone clue only deepened the enigma. If they'd gone east, where did they go next, and why was there no other trace? Yet this single find only made the mystery more perplexing. If they'd headed east, where had they gone afterward, and why was there no further sign of them? Day 2 saw ramped-up efforts with teams from Nye County, Nevada, and Inyo County, California, joining in. The second day brought intensified searches with groups from Nye County, Nevada, and Inyo County, California, pitching in. 2 helicopters joined, their blades thumping steadily as they scoured the desert for any sign of the lost family. A pair of helicopters entered the fray, their rotors chopping through the air as they scanned the desert for any trace of the missing family. Search zones covered more of Anvil Canyon, parts of Warm Spring Road, Butte Valley, Mengle Pass, and the path between the canyon and the main valley. The search areas expanded to include more of Anvil Canyon, sections of Warm Spring Road, Butte Valley, Mengle Pass, and the route linking the canyon to the main valley. The searchers were seasoned pros, many with years of desert rescue experience, skilled at reading the terrain and spotting subtle signs of human presence in this brutal environment. These were expert searchers, many with decades of desert rescue know-how, adept at interpreting the landscape and detecting faint clues of human passage in this harsh setting. They checked every dry wash, explored every cave, and inspected every possible spot where a desperate family might have sought shelter from the deadly heat. They scoured every gully, investigated every cavern, and examined every potential hideout where a frantic family might have tried to escape the scorching sun. But the desert gave up nothing. Yet the desert yielded no answers. On October 25th, various teams spread out across Death Valley. On October 25th, multiple crews fanned out to search the Death Valley region. One group combed the area between Anvil Canyon and Badwater Road. One team swept the stretch between Anvil Canyon and Badwater Road. Another, from Victorville, scoured the southeast edge of Butte Valley. A Victorville crew searched the southeastern border of Butte Valley. A Bureau of Land Management ranger checked the west side of Mengle Pass between Ballarat and Barker Ranch. A ranger from the Bureau of Land Management patrolled the western side of Mengle Pass from Ballarat to Barker Ranch. A Lake Mead team pushed from Anvil Canyon over the mountains into Butte Valley. A group from Lake Mead trekked from Anvil Canyon, crossing the mountains to reach Butte Valley. The Indian Wells team meticulously searched around Willow Spring at the top of Anvil Canyon. The Indian Wells crew carefully combed the area near Willow Spring, high up in Anvil Canyon. Another group, Seal Margie, began in central Anvil Canyon, then moved north and west. Another team, Seal Margie, started in the heart of Anvil Canyon before branching out to the north and west. On October 26th, the final day of the search, teams pressed on in the brutal desert conditions. On October 26th, the fourth and last day, searchers continued their efforts in the harsh desert environment. The Death Valley National Park team explored north of Warm Spring Canyon and nearby mine sites where someone lost might have sought refuge. The Death Valley Park crew searched north of Warm Spring Canyon and checked nearby mining areas where a disoriented person might have taken shelter. The Victorville team zeroed in on Striped Butte in Butte Valley, while the Lake Mead team also covered Striped Butte, hiking along Warm Spring Canyon Road. The Victorville group focused on Striped Butte in Butte Valley, while the Lake Mead team also scoured Striped Butte, walking along Warm Spring Canyon Road. A BLM ranger patrolled the west side of Mengle Pass and nearby paths the family might have taken toward Ballarat. A BLM ranger explored the western side of Mengle Pass and adjacent trails the family could have used heading toward Ballarat. The Indian Wells team searched near Warm Spring Road and West Side Road after spotting footprints in the area. The Indian Wells crew investigated around Warm Spring Road and West Side Road after discovering footprints nearby. A new Apple Valley team checked along West Side Road, moving north from Warm Spring Canyon Road in case the family had sought shelter there. A fresh team from Apple Valley patrolled West Side Road, heading north from Warm Spring Canyon Road, looking for signs the family might have sought refuge. 2 helicopters swept over Anvil Canyon, including its southern reaches, but strong winds hampered aerial searches. A pair of choppers scanned Anvil Canyon, including its southern parts, though high winds made searching from the air challenging. With no new leads since the beer bottle on day 1 and no hope of finding the group alive, the official search was halted. With no further clues since the beer bottle discovery on the first day and zero chance of finding the family alive, the formal search was called off. A Death Valley National Park spokesperson noted that about 250 people took part in the effort. A spokesperson for Death Valley National Park reported that roughly 250 individuals participated in the operation. The team had searched strategically, targeting the most probable areas, but still found no trace of the missing family. The crews had searched methodically, focusing on the likeliest spots, yet uncovered no sign of the vanished family. The case was shelved, joining the list of America's unsolved mysteries. The investigation was filed away, becoming another of the nation's enduring, unresolved enigmas. Wild theories started to swirl, each more outlandish than the last. Conspiracy ideas began to surface, each one more far-fetched than the one before. Some claimed Michael Johnson was trying to infiltrate the China Lake Naval Weapons Center to uncover secrets about hybrid propulsion tech. Certain rumors suggested David Wilson aimed to sneak into the China Lake Naval Weapons Center to learn about classified hybrid propulsion technology. This theory held that the family was either recruited into a secret government program or silenced for seeing something they shouldn't have. The idea was that the family had either been pulled into a covert government operation or eliminated for witnessing something forbidden. The theory gained some traction due to Michael's work as an architect and his supposed curiosity about cutting-edge tech, but those who knew him called it nonsense. This speculation got some attention because of David's career as an architect and his rumored interest in advanced technology, but his friends dismissed it as pure fantasy. Michael was a devoted family man on a vacation, not some covert operative. David was a dedicated dad enjoying a family trip, not a spy on a mission. Another idea floated that the family had faked their own vanishing act. Some speculated that the family had deliberately orchestrated their disappearance. David Wilson's co-workers recalled him mentioning a desire to relocate to Costa Rica, to begin anew in a different land. Colleagues of Michael Johnson remembered him talking about starting fresh in Costa Rica, dreaming of a new life abroad. Maybe they picked Death Valley to slip away because its extreme isolation made it seem like no one would search for folks presumed dead there. Perhaps they chose Death Valley as their escape route, its remote and harsh nature making it unlikely anyone would look for people thought to have perished. But this idea had its flaws too. Yet this theory wasn't without its holes. Why would someone opt to vanish in one of the planet's most treacherous places? Why would anyone decide to disappear in one of the world's most hazardous environments? Why put two kids' lives on the line for such a convoluted scheme? Why endanger the lives of two children for an elaborate ruse? And how could four people, including a 4-year-old, keep that kind of secret for years? How could four individuals, one just 4 years old, maintain such a deception for so long? Darker theories pointed to foul play. More sinister ideas suggested criminal involvement. It's possible the family ran into crooks running illegal operations in the desert's lonely stretches. Drug labs? Human smugglers? Or just dangerous types who viewed the German visitors as either a threat or a chance for gain. The family might have crossed paths with criminals operating in the desert's isolated reaches. Drug traffickers, human traffickers, or ruthless individuals who saw the German tourists as either a risk or an opportunity. Death Valley's vast, empty expanse would surely offer plenty of ways to hide evidence. The sprawling desolation of Death Valley would certainly provide countless ways to conceal any traces of wrongdoing. Jake Sullivan wasn't a trained detective. Ben Carter wasn't a professional sleuth. He was a Los Angeles County search and rescue worker, skilled in both the science of staying alive and the craft of tracking down what others couldn't find. He worked in search and rescue for Los Angeles County, well-versed in survival techniques and the art of locating what others had overlooked. In 2009, 13 years after the family vanished, he came across their story and couldn't shake it. In 2009, 13 years after the family disappeared, he stumbled upon their case and found himself hooked. It wasn't just the heartbreak of 4 people disappearing without a clue that gripped Sullivan. It was the gaps in logic and the way the case was managed. What grabbed Carter wasn't only the tragedy of 4 souls vanishing without a trace. It was the inconsistencies and the mishandling of the investigation. He tackled the puzzle like an engineer, breaking it into smaller pieces and examining each with a clear, unbiased perspective. He approached the mystery like an engineer solving a tough problem, dissecting it into parts and analyzing each one with fresh eyes. Sullivan believed the search efforts had focused on the wrong areas. Carter was convinced that everyone had been looking in the wrong places. Using the German language guidebook from the van, he mapped out the path the family probably meant to follow. With the German guidebook found in the van, he pieced together the route the family likely intended to take. The booklet outlined a trail west through Butte Valley and Mengel Pass, beyond the notorious Barker Ranch, once a hideout for Charles Manson's cult, then north to the abandoned town of Ballarat and toward Yosemite National Park. The guide detailed a path heading west through Butte Valley and Mengel Pass, past the infamous Barker Ranch, where Charles Manson's followers once holed up, then north to the ghost town of Ballarat and on to Yosemite National Park. Through this perspective, the family's movements started to click. This lens made the family's journey suddenly make sense. They'd left their campsite in Hanapa Canyon on the morning of July 23rd and driven south to Warm Spring Road, veering west. On the morning of July 23rd, they departed their Hanapa Canyon campsite, heading south to Warm Spring Road before turning west. At first, the road seemed passable, giving them confidence to keep going toward what they thought was a valid route to their next stop. Initially, the road appeared drivable, encouraging them to press on toward what they believed was a legitimate path to their next destination. At the Warm Spring camp, they likely paused, hoping to meet someone who could advise them on the road ahead. They probably stopped at the Warm Spring camp, expecting to find someone who could share insights about the route forward. Instead, they found only an empty mining camp. But all they encountered was a deserted mining outpost. So they signed the guest book and kept moving west. They left their names in the logbook and continued westward. When they reached the geologist's cabin in Butte Valley, they again hoped for guidance from someone there. Arriving at the geologist's cabin in Butte Valley, they once more looked for someone to offer direction. Finding it unoccupied, they grabbed the American flag as a keepsake and pushed on to Mengle Pass. Seeing it empty, they took the American flag as a memento and carried on toward Mengle Pass. But Mengle Pass was impossible for their minivan to navigate. Mengle Pass, however, proved impassable for their minivan. The guidebook suggested an alternate route, a path down Anvil Canyon that appeared to loop back to the main valley. Their booklet proposed another option, a trail through Anvil Canyon that seemed to lead back to the main valley. Faced with turning back or taking the shorter path, they chose the latter. Given the choice to retrace their steps or try the quicker route, they opted for the shortcut. Sullivan's theory broke from the official searches in one key way. Carter's hypothesis diverged from the official efforts in a critical aspect. He believed the family had gone south from their stuck van, not east or north as others had thought. He was certain the family had headed south from their stranded vehicle, contrary to the east or north directions others assumed. While standard search and rescue logic said lost people would head back to a familiar safe spot, Sullivan theorized that Michael Johnson would have checked his maps and noticed the China Lake Naval Weapons Center's northern edge just 8 or 9 miles south. Though traditional search doctrine suggested lost individuals would return to a known safe place, Carter believed David Wilson would have studied his maps and seen the northern boundary of the China Lake Naval Weapons Center only 8 or 9 miles to the south. To a frantic father fighting to protect his family, a military base would have looked like a beacon of hope. To a desperate dad trying to save his loved ones, a military installation would have seemed like a lifeline. There'd surely be people there, water, radios, and a way to call for help. Surely there would be personnel, water, communication devices, and a means to summon aid. On the map, the hills between the van and the base didn't seem too daunting, especially to someone unfamiliar with Death Valley's brutal terrain. The map made the hills separating the van from the base look manageable, particularly to someone unaware of Death Valley's unforgiving landscape. Sullivan figured the family had stayed at least one night at the van, based on the waste found nearby, then locked it and headed east down Anvil Canyon to where the beer bottle was found. Carter reasoned that the family had spent at least one night by the van, supported by the nearby waste, before locking it and trekking east through Anvil Canyon to the spot where the beer bottle was discovered. From there, they'd turn south, aiming for what they hoped was rescue at the China Lake facility, a path no one had thoroughly explored. Then, they veered south toward what they believed was salvation at the China Lake base, a route no one had searched in depth. Official searchers had ruled it out, thinking no seasoned desert traveler would head south into such harsh terrain. The official teams had dismissed the idea, assuming no experienced desert wanderer would venture south into such brutal conditions. But the family weren't seasoned desert explorers. They were tourists with outdated maps and a desperate drive to protect their kids. But the family weren't skilled desert trekkers. They were visitors with incomplete maps, driven by an urgent need to keep their children safe. With this theory in hand, Sullivan launched his own search in 2009, 13 years after the family's disappearance. Armed with this hypothesis, Carter began his own search in 2009, 13 years after the family vanished. He teamed up with Sam Carter, and together they scoured the rugged, barren land southeast of Golar Wash, about 8 miles from the abandoned van and 4 miles from the China Lake fence. He joined forces with Luke Hayes, and the two combed the harsh, desolate terrain southeast of Golar Wash, roughly 8 miles from the deserted van and 4 miles from the China Lake boundary. What they uncovered would finally crack one of America's longest-standing mysteries and bring some peace to families who'd waited years for closure. Their discovery would at last unravel one of the nation's most enduring enigmas, offering a measure of solace to loved ones who'd been left in limbo for over a decade. On November 12, 2009, Jake Sullivan and Sam Carter found Emily Clark's remains spread across about 150 meters of desert ground. On November 12, 2009, Ben Carter and Luke Hayes discovered Sarah Davis's remains scattered over roughly 150 meters of desert floor. Her passport and bank ID, complete with a photo, verified who she was. Her passport and bank identification, including a photograph, confirmed her identity. Sam found a toothbrush and a tube of salve or toothpaste in a small wash to the northwest. Luke spotted a toothbrush and a tube of some kind of cream or toothpaste in a nearby wash to the northwest. They came across pieces of a small shoe, possibly a woman's or a child's. They found fragments of a small shoe, which could have belonged to a woman or a child. Part of Emily's daily planner turned up, filled with business cards from places the family had visited on their trip. A section of Sarah's day planner was recovered, stuffed with business cards from spots the family had stopped at during their journey. Besides the 2-liter wine bottle, they also found a clear bottle about 70 feet downstream, later identified as one of the bud bottles from the van. In addition to the 2-liter wine bottle, they discovered a clear bottle some 70 feet downstream, later confirmed as one of the bud bottles from the van. In the days that followed, they also found Michael Johnson's remains. Over the next few days, they also located David Wilson's remains. The site was exactly where Sullivan's theory had pointed. In terrain so rough and remote, it's no surprise earlier searches missed it. The location matched Carter's prediction perfectly. In an area so rugged and isolated, it's understandable why prior searches overlooked it. The family had indeed headed south from their stranded van, chasing hope at a military base that likely had no staff and definitely no means to launch a rescue. The family had truly gone south from their stuck vehicle, seeking refuge at a military outpost that probably lacked personnel and certainly couldn't organize a rescue. This find put an end to 13 years of rumors and wild theories. The discovery silenced 13 years of speculation and far-out conspiracies. There was no government conspiracy, no planned disappearance, no grand deception. No secret government plot, no staged vanishing, no elaborate cover-up existed. For people had simply made a string of reasonable choices that led them into a deadly trap with no way out. For individuals had made a series of logical decisions that guided them into a fatal snare they couldn't escape. Later searches turned up more remains, but there wasn't enough DNA to confirm they belonged to the two children. Subsequent searches uncovered additional remains, though DNA evidence was too limited to verify they were the two kids. But the mystery of what happened to the Death Valley wanderers was finally solved. Still, the enigma of the Death Valley travelers' fate was at last resolved. The tale of the Death Valley Wanderers is, at its core, a heartbreaking story of good intentions derailed by faulty information. The story of the Death Valley Travelers is ultimately a tragic saga of well-meaning plans undone by misleading guidance. A family destined for a long life instead fell victim to circumstances they couldn't have foreseen and dangers they didn't comprehend. A family meant for a full life became casualties of unexpected conditions and perils they couldn't grasp. Yet their story reveals something deep about human resilience, the triumph of hope over reality, and the incredible efforts people will make to uncover the truth. But their tale teaches us something profound about human spirit, the power of hope against all odds, and the extraordinary lengths some will go to find answers. Michael Johnson wanted to share America's wonders with his son and his girlfriend's child. David Wilson aimed to show his son and his partner's child the marvels of the United States. Emily Clark was diving into an adventure with a man she adored. Sarah Davis was embracing a thrilling journey with a man she loved deeply. 11-year-old Ethan Parker was discovering a world far beyond his small German town. 11-year-old Jacob Harris was exploring a world far larger than his quiet German city. 4-year-old Noah Davis was just along for the ride, trusting the grown-ups to keep him safe. 4-year-old Liam Thompson was simply tagging along, relying on the adults to protect him. When their trip turned into a nightmare, they made choices that felt right in the moment. As their vacation became a disaster, they made decisions that seemed sensible at the time. They sought another route when their first plan failed. They looked for an alternate path when their initial route proved impossible. They tried to reach what they thought was a safe haven when their van got stuck. They aimed for what they believed was a secure spot after their vehicle became stranded. They walked toward a place their maps suggested offered help. They trekked toward a location their maps indicated might bring rescue. Each choice made sense on its own, but together they spelled disaster. Individually, each decision seemed reasonable, but combined, they led to tragedy. The true heroes here are the ones who never gave up. The real champions of this story are those who refuse to quit. Jake Sullivan and Sam Carter poured countless hours into studying the case, trudging through treacherous terrain, and chasing leads that official searchers had ignored. Ben Carter and Luke Hayes dedicated endless hours to researching the case, hiking through dangerous landscapes, and pursuing clues that professional teams had overlooked. Their persistence brought answers to families who'd waited over a decade for clarity. Their determination delivered closure to loved ones who'd been in the dark for more than 10 years. The families in Dresden could finally hold memorial services, knowing with some certainty what had happened to their kin. The families in Dresden were at last able to conduct memorials with a clearer understanding of their loved one's fate. The mystery that had tormented them for 13 years was resolved, letting them mourn fully and start healing. The puzzle that had haunted them for 13 years was finally solved, allowing them to grieve properly and begin to move forward. Sullivan later voiced frustration over the lack of support from some officials, pointing out that without his and Carter's work, the remains might still be out there. Carter later expressed irritation at the lack of cooperation from certain authorities, noting that without his and Hayes' efforts, the remains might never have been found. Their triumph, where experts had fallen short, shows the strength of dogged determination and new perspectives in cracking old cases. Their success, where professionals had failed, highlights the power of relentless persistence and fresh thinking in solving cold cases. The case is also a stark warning about the risks of America's wild places. This story also serves as a sobering reminder of the dangers lurking in America's untamed regions. Death Valley is stunningly beautiful, but it's also one of the harshest environments on the planet. Death Valley is breathtaking, yet it ranks among the most unforgiving places on Earth. Every year, unprepared travelers misjudge its dangers and end up in life-or-death situations. Each year, ill-equipped visitors underestimate its risks, finding themselves in perilous predicaments. The takeaways are obvious: bring ample water and food when heading into desert areas. The lessons are clear: Carry plenty of water and provisions when venturing into desert regions. Use vehicles suited for the terrain you're crossing. Drive vehicles designed for the landscape you plan to navigate. Tell others your travel plans before you set out. Share your itinerary with someone before you depart. Carry communication tools and know how to use them. Bring reliable communication devices and understand how to operate them. Above all, don't trust maps alone. They might not show current road conditions or hazards. Most crucially, don't rely solely on maps as they may not reflect up-to-date road conditions or dangers. The Death Valley Wanderers have woven themselves into American lore, their story retold as both a warning and a tribute to the strength of hope. The Death Valley Travelers have become part of U.S. folklore, their tale shared as both a cautionary lesson and a testament to the resilience of hope. Their tragedy underscores that every missing person case involves real people with families who deserve answers, no matter how long it takes. Their loss reminds us that every disappearance case represents actual people with loved ones who need closure, no matter how many years pass. The desert holds many secrets, but this one has been laid bare. The desert guards countless mysteries, but this one has finally been revealed. Yet sometimes, when hope feels lost and answers seem out of reach, the human spirit proves mightier than the desert itself. Still, there are times when, despite fading hope and elusive answers, the human will shine stronger than the desert's harsh grip.